Yeah. So Parliament is Great Britain's group of lawmaking officials. Like I said, they're not elected by the colonists. They're elected by the citizens living over in Great Britain. Okay. So some of the colonists are going to resent the power of the colonial governors. So a lot of the colonial governors who are making the colonists follow these laws, or the leaders of the colonies, they're not selected by the colonists. They're handpicked or selected by the King of Britain. Okay. So the colonists are going to have no power over the laws that the colonial governor officials are going to be passing and forcing them to follow, or creating and implementing in the colony. And some of the ways that the colonists are going to show their opposition to all these British taxes is by tarring and feathering British officials and British tax collectors. So here you see an image of some shipbuilders in the New England region tarring and feathering a British government official who came to their shipyard to collect taxes. You see them pouring some tea in their mouth, in the tax collector's mouth, because Britain had passed a tax on tea. You see the gentleman tarred and feathered. Okay, so this was a routine thing in the colonies. The group known as the Patriots, who opposed British control over the colonies, are going to tar and feather anybody who supported the British government. Okay, because they're going to be opposed to the British government. So this tax collector collecting taxes for the British government, obviously associated with the British government. These shipbuilders do not like him. So what they're going to do is they're going to pour hot tar all over his body, and then put feathers all over him, and probably hang him from that little rope that you see in the tree in the background by his feet, and kind of make an example of him, saying, hey, you like your Stamp Act, you like your Tea Act that makes us pay all these additional taxes. We'll see how you like the view from this tree while you're covered in hot tar that we use to build ships with, to bind wood together, and feathers from a chicken, usually. Okay, so they're going to kind of make an example out of people like this that come into their shipyard. And the tar was very painful. It would burn your skin. You'd often have, second, third degree burns as a result of being tarred and feathered. So another major area of colonial dissatisfaction was that Great Britain wanted strict control over legislators. So, you had those small town meetings that the New England region was having, where they would elect their own officials and create their own laws for their towns to follow. Well, all of a sudden, further down the road, Great Britain did not want those meetings to happen anymore. And the colonists weren't allowed to create any laws for themselves to follow, even in their small towns. The British government kind of micromanaged everything, per se, which means they basically created every single little law for the colonists to follow. Okay, they didn't let the colonists make any of their own decisions. So the colonists felt like they had no power. Okay, they weren't allowed to elect any officials to make laws for them. They weren't allowed to vote for or against any of the laws that they had. So a lot of colonists are going to be very unhappy with that. And of course, the colonies are going to oppose British taxes. How do they show their opposition? By doing things like tarring and feathering tax collectors. And they're going to publish a whole lot of newspapers in opposition to British control over the colonies, and some pamphlets, like a pamphlet known as Common Sense, a gentleman by the name of Thomas Paine, that's going to voice opposition to British control. And they're not going to like the Stamp Act or all the tax acts that follow the Stamp Act, like the Tea Act, the Sugar Act, and the Quartering Act, where they have to house British soldiers because the colonists refuse to pay for their taxes. So the British government says, hey, you don't want to pay for your taxes. You want to destroy tea in the Boston Harbor, like in the event of the Boston Tea Party. Here's what we're going to do to you. We're going to pass a law that forces you to house and feed British soldiers. So when the Quartering Act's passed, that's when the colonists really get upset, because they have to literally let British soldiers live in their homes and they have to feed them. That's what the Quartering Act states. But before we get into that, let's jump back to the Proclamation of 1763, which is issued by the King of Britain after the French and Indian War. And it's going to restrict the Western movement of settlers past that proclamation line that you see right there in that image. Okay, so even though a lot of the colonists helped win the land west of the Appalachian Mountains for Britain, they're now being told by the British government that they can't settle in those lands, even though they helped Britain win the war against the French and the Indians who owned those lands. They're being told by the British government, oh, even though you helped us win that land, you can't settle out there or explore out there because it's too dangerous. You can't cross this line. So the British government had British soldiers patrolling that line, and anybody that crossed that proclamation line would have to pay a fine. If you got caught crossing it over and over again, you're oftentimes thrown in jail. Okay. Colonists are going to be super upset about that. So in our discussions to come, we're going to talk about how the colonists have a growing opposition to British control of the colonies. And eventually, it's going to lead to them declaring their independence in a document that we'll talk about in a couple weeks. Until then, next time, I'll see you. Enjoy the rest of your day.